Last week, I was trying to amplify on the work I had done to turn developmental psychology into a system for understanding the challenges of the people who show up in psychotherapists' office, and to use the perspectives of developmental psychology to replace the highly medicalized theories of, quote, psychopathology that we have followed traditionally in the field. uh, to see people as struggling because they have found themselves in some kind of developmental impasse, and they have not acquired the kinds of wisdom or tools they need to get through the particular impasse that they have found themselves aging into, is not stigmatizing at all. You're not crazy. You're not a strange deviant. You're just a person who's struggling to keep becoming, as all of us have to do. So it really is a much gentler way to think of people and a much more welcoming way to invite them to practice. I had just finished trying to show what I had developed for applying Ericksonian theory, individual lifespan stages, to work with clients. And I had used the previous case I had talked about, the case of Mark, and was linking the two together. I had gotten fairly far in my first use of the technology I had developed, but I didn't finish something. So I'm going to see if I can get there now and pull something back up on the screen. Okay, there it is. Good. I got that to work at least. Let me pull it to one side. Oh, and I got to go through it. Oops. Oh, damn it. It keeps sticking. Come on. There it is. Stage 5 in Ericksonian,
All
in the
right, so
Erickson.
we're not seeing it. All I'm seeing is day 2 handouts, the folder and everything that's in it.
Oh, God Almighty. Okay, let's stop this. Let's see what I can do. Ah, well, I'm going to pull it up and read from it. Do you see me at least?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, now you see it, don't you?
Yeah, now we see it.
God damn it. I don't know what I did to make it happen, but I'll use it. Glad to have it. Got to get to stage 5. It's on the next page. Here it comes. There it is. Hooray. I had talked about how to use this rubric that I created here. The left-hand column is the kind of things, the kinds of gestures or behaviors or moods that the client will engage in that should signal the person working with the client that there's probably problems in stage 5. The the central column is what needs to happen in order to facilitate the passage through that stage. And the right-hand column I haven't talked about yet. Those are the things the therapist can do. Ah, God damn it. Oh, now how do I get back to anything?
We can see everything still.
You can?
Yeah, 5,
Oh,
1,
how do I
2.
get back?
I don't know.
I can't get back to my own handout now. That's wonderful.
To err is human. To really screw things up takes a computer.
Ah, no, that doesn't work. I can't get back to my own handout, even though it's on your screen. That is good.
Yes, it's still on the screen.
Let me try something. Ah, did that do it?
No,
No.
it's it,
I can see it now. Is it still on
yeah,
your screen?
Yes,
it's
still on
still
the
on our.
screen.
Hooray! I have no idea what I did. Okay, here are the things the therapist can do to help a client get through unresolved issues in his adolescence and early adulthood. The therapist can question unquestioned role behavior. These are for young people who've been scripted very harshly, both by the culture they belong to and or by their parents about what their destination is, what they should believe, what their occupational identity should be, and on and on. Uh, any healthy young person starts questioning that as they move through adolescence. And if they're not doing it, the therapist can begin to ask them to not take things for granted and to reopen things that they thought were closed. We could send them to encourage vision quests. I like telling kids to take a wilderness experience sometimes or go visit someplace they've never visited, travel to other locations. We can encourage moratoria of one sort or another, just like I did for the client I told you about. And for particularly for adolescents, you can join with them and ask them to engage in more experimentation, and they can explore creative defiance and rebellion. Uh, they don't have to just do what's told to them all the time. And you can teach them something about using the times of solitude, giving themselves plenty of solitude so they can begin to hear the internal voice that's trying to whisper to them, the true voice of their authentic self. Good, I did that. So, and for every one of the 10 stages, there is the same thing. There's a description of the kinds of issues that signal trouble. There's a central column about what has to happen in order to resolve the difficulty. And then the right-hand column says, what are some things the therapist could try to experiment with in the therapeutic sessions that might facilitate making the transition? And I will now take this off the screen and move on. Okay, hooray. I shall now proceed. We will move on to take up other developmental issues. We will go to the family life cycle and go to the second stage, and we will go to the sixth stage of the individual life cycle. Now, let me see if I can get the handouts and do screen sharing. Let me take this. What's on the screen? Is individual life cycle stages on the screen?
It's the folder with the day 2 handouts folder.
Okay.
Maybe don't hit screen share until you're absolutely on the thing you want to share. Maybe is that, I'm not sure what the sequences are.
I'm going to try that. Here's the family life cycle. Ah,
Still just you.
wait, there. This is the family life
There you
cycle.
go.
Yes, there you go.
Yes, yeah.
Well, we'll muddle our way through this somehow.
It's it'll work.
All right. Uh, Stage two of the family life cycle after leaving home has taken place is securing intimate relatedness, coupling and its alternatives. I added that to Carter McGoldrick, coupling and its alternatives, because our culture is becoming increasingly diverse. It used to be there was one preferred and usual way, and Carter McGoldrick are guilty of being trapped in our culture. That was the destination for adults growing up in the culture. If we were to have intimate connection, it should be through a monogamous relationship with one other person. And no, that's not the case. All of us need to be appreciated, have human warmth, human connectedness, human sustaining forces around us. They don't necessarily have to be had only within that model. There are many, many models of how this can be achieved. Serial monogamy is one of them, to be with somebody for a period of time until it begins to feel oppressive, complicated, or disappointing, and then just simply move on to somebody else. This is an attempt in some ways to keep the liveliness and loveliness of infatuation alive all the time and not have to get into the era where being with somebody requires serious and challenging work. Uh, uh, Swinging is another model. The two people are in a coupledom, but they don't limit themselves to the coupledom. They go out and find other couples to have four ways with, or three ways with, or any variations of how they're going to spend time with each other and relate to each other. Open marriages are another way of trying to fulfill this need. And then there is what my younger daughter does currently. She has a friendship group, and she's only comfortable when she's with the group. She doesn't spend a lot of time one on one. The group gets together frequently. They get together to spend time, go to concerts, go to movies, have dinners out together, spend evenings together, play games together, travel together. And one of the members of the group is her sexual partner, but she's not living with that person and she's not living with any other members of the group. From my perspective, I'll talk about the Israeli experience in a moment. From my perspective, this is a way to take care of having good connections and good nourishment without becoming too vulnerable. It's like a computer that has a motherboard, and there are many different plugins on the motherboard. So if one of the members of the group moves away or loses interest, it's fairly easy to just replace the one member, and you don't have to disturb the whole thing. And you don't have all your emotional eggs in one basket, so that your companion in everything and forever everything is a single other person. It's one or another members of the group fill all those functions. Now, an Israeli sociologist in about 1975, 1980, when the kibbutz movement was starting to slow down in Israel, did a long-term follow-up of children who had been raised as infants in the communal nurseries of the kibbutzim. Uh, the life pattern there was the parents had adult work to do all day, and the children, if they had children, were all taken off to the nursery where they were put in a communal nursery. And part of the adult work that some of the adults did was to be members of the staff of the communal nursery. So the children were not raised with any strong one-on-one bonds with parenting figures. They were raised communally in the nursery. They actually only were with their parents from about 7 o'clock at night when the parents would come home from work till 7 o'clock the next morning when parents had to get ready for work. So they actually spent very little time with their own parents. Uh, so what became of these people? According to the outcomes of the sociological research, these were very resilient people. They could adapt to changing circumstances very, very well. But the other thing that was characteristic of them was they had very low marriage rates. Having an intense, close relationship with a single other person felt strange to them, felt challenging, felt foreign to them, and they weren't inclined to go do that for themselves. So I think our culture is moving in that direction. Marriage rates are falling in this culture, and not for the stark reasons or the really different life pattern that was in the kibbutzim, but we're moving in that direction. It is more and more rare for an adult, a newborn child in the United States to have a close and intense relationship with just one person. We're now into shared parenting. We're into two-parent households. We're into putting the kid in the daycare center. We're into hiring nannies. We ourselves are raising children similarly that have relationships with more than one adult, and therefore marriage becomes less tempting to them or less interesting to them. It doesn't signify the same kind of comfort it did when you had only one parent, and that was the person who nurtured you, consoled you, and was your everything, at least for a long period of time, until you were more capable of separating and beginning more independent life. That's why I added coupling and its alternatives, because there are many alternatives. Oh, I forgot one. There are people who get married, but they're married legally, and they're not really very faithful to that person. They have secret love affairs over and over and over again. They can't take all of themselves with one person and carry that off. It's too stressing and too challenging for them. They need some action on the side all the time outside of the primary relationship. So the challenge still goes on. During the second era, we work out and we arrive at what is to be the form in which we secure intimate relatedness. This usually plays out between emancipation from the family and somewhere on into the early to middle 30s. That its final form finally evolves after a lot of experimentation with a lot of things. But whatever the form of that thing is that we develop, we must make a commitment to the new system. We have to know this is who we are and this is the plan we're going to make for our life going forward. I will talk, however, today about marriage because it still is the thing we're taught to want to esteem. If we don't move in that direction, we have to put up with stigma. We have to put up with a lot of questions. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you getting serious? Why aren't you settling in? We still nag each other in the culture to do this. So I'm going to talk a lot about marriage for a second reason, marriage as the destination for because for a second reason, many of the clients who show up in our consulting rooms are either considering marriage and have reservations about it, or are already in a marriage and the marriage is troublesome. So they have made what seems like a commitment to the system, but they're not carrying it out very effectively. So there are two principles. What are the principles of transition? First is the formation of the intimate system. If you're going to commit to a new system, you have to form the nature of that system. And I will try and translate the psychobabble here. There are many elements in forming an effective marriage. I will start with the simplest. We live in a romantic culture. We're expected to do something that wasn't true as long as the late 19th century. We're expecting to pick a partner who will be our practical partner and problem solve with us and take care of children if children come and be our financial partner and working out financial issues. But at the same time, that person is going to be our best friend and our erotic companion in very exciting and very fulfilling ways. That's a lot of burden to put on one relationship that a person would carry out all those functions, but it's still expected. And as a matter of fact, we encourage young people, and we've been trained ourselves to let erotic attractiveness be the leading thing that usually starts being interested in another person. We see somebody and that person seems to have magical romantic qualities. What is that wonderful song from South Pacific? Some enchanted evening, you will see a stranger. You will see a stranger across a crowded room. That's what we're encouraged to do. We go to a bar, we see somebody sitting there, she looks interesting, we want to walk up and talk to her. Somebody introduces us to a cousin, and we feel a little bit of throbbing sexual desire for her. She looks like she'd be fun to have an erotic engagement with, and so we start moving towards her. Uh, where am I going? Here's where I'm going. If we're fortunate, we will have a wonderful, what I call attachment, an erotic infatuation. That's the kind of attachment we have. It's an infatuation. Uh, the sociologists call it a limerence. And being infatuated is wonderful. The world is perfect if you have another that's carrying a heavy load of infatuation for you, and you for her, or him if you're gay. Everything, food tastes better, music sounds more delightful, the weather looks glorious, flowers are beautiful, everything is wonderful. I would wish that in the course of anyone's life who I know, they have 6 or 7 very powerful, wonderful falling in love experiences over the course of a lifetime. There is a problem, however. I think we have been shaped by a demon who has wanted to laugh at us. No infatuation lasts, because infatuation is based on the unrealness of the partner, the mystical not knowing of the partner. What forms the attachment is a masturbation fantasy that we've been carrying for several years as we move through uh, our adolescent years. The masturbation fantasy is of the perfect other. We have seen her in our when we have masturbated, we have heard her voice, we have seen how she's touched us, we've seen how she's comforted us. We know what she's like. We in all her aspects. Now we meet a new person in the real world. The new person has some obvious characteristics that are part of the makeup of our masturbation fantasy, and we foolishly believe we found the perfect other. But we have not, because as we get to know and interact with the realness of the person we've chosen to start the journey with, infatuation begins to wither. We find the realness of what's disappointing, what's problematic, what's difficult, what isn't at all like the perfect other we're looking for. And we begin to get into trouble. Infatuation begins to collapse. If we're very unlucky and we approach somebody in the bar, the first time she opens her mouth and says a few sentences to us, that shatters the infatuation. We can know very quickly, no, 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 this is a mistake. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking to that person. If the infatuation lasts longer, we may have several further episodes. We may go to bed with that person, but somewhere fairly soon, the problems are going to start and the infatuation is going to die. Uh, the record of anybody I've ever met that's been able to sustain infatuation is about 3 years. I once had a couple who really kept it going for 3 years before it started to become problematic for them, and they were devastated. They thought they had been in the presence of their perfect other, and were discovering finally they were not. There is no perfect other. So that's the first thing, to live through the death of infatuation, and then to make a decision that we're now going to try to see if infatuation is not possible, is love possible? And love is a very different thing than infatuation. Love is a feeling state that one has in the absence of infatuation. It's a feeling that the other is precious because life is so much better because the other exists. But love is realistic. It knows about the irritating things of the other. It knows about the disappointments that the other inflicts on us. It knows about the things that make us gnash our teeth in despair. It knows about how hard the work is to hold on to the other and to resolve differences with the other. Nevertheless, Life is better every day because the other is around. And that for sure is love. That's not infatuation. Love is a very sustaining thing in and of its own right. But so many young people I hear, she isn't the other. I have to keep searching until I find the other. Well, they're not really going to be connected to anybody in a realistic way until they surrender that daydream and learn how to create a loving relationship rather than an infatuated relationship. The second challenge that comes up after a while, and it may be related to the death of the first, is that we discover that conflict is in our relationship. We are not the perfect mirror image of the other's longings, nor is that person the perfect mirror image of us. We have differences. Uh, there are important differences. We don't agree about significant things. We have to learn how to manage conflict if we're to build a successful system that we're going to devote ourselves to. Conflict resolution is quite a challenge. It comes up in a variety of forms and in a variety of ways. And there are developmental stages in the management of conflict. We start off as infants and as young toddlers with very poor conflict resolution skills. We have practically none. If we're frustrated or uh, put out of sorts by an activity that frustrates us or by the actions of an interfering adult that's preventing us from have everything we want or taking toys away or telling us no to some activity we want to pursue, we're in conflict. And about the best we could do is yell no or cry out or throw blocks or have some kind of tantrum. Tantrum behavior is very familiar as the child develops a will and develops a sense of self and doesn't like being frustrated by what's going on. That's the best they can do in terms of conflict resolution. And unfortunately, about a third of the human race never grows out of this as their conflict resolution style. They throw tantrums when it isn't going according to the way they want things to go. And are saddled with domestic violence, child abuse, assaults in public places, all kinds of terrible things because people remain, with regard to the development of conflict resolution skills, toddlers or infants, even if they're in the body of adults, and they can do terrible harm and do terrible things to other people. But they are who they are. They know they've never moved on. They've never learned. They've never emerged into the second stage of conflict resolution. And it's quite a job getting them to contain themselves and to learn to move on. The next step starts around, next step in conflict resolution starts around age 4 or 5, usually coincident with going out to preschool or the kindergarten and starting to interact with many more human beings. They discover that there's a concept called fairness. That is, there's a rule for how people should behave, what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And if there's a conflict between two people, it's because one of them is right and the other is wrong. One of them is not doing the proper thing. If only we can figure out for this particular case of frustration what the proper thing is, then everything should flow more freely if only both people will agree on the proper thing. And since we start off with great egocentrism, what we're convinced most typically in the beginning is the proper thing, is the thing that we believe is the proper thing. We are convinced that our partner is even either behaving improperly or is crazy or is stupid or is purposely malicious. If they're not agreeing with our sense of what's right and proper at that moment, they are in one of those four categories of stigma, and they can't be taken seriously. What we need to do is to redouble our attempts to convince them they're wrong and to for them to give up what they're trying to do because we know for certainty that what they're doing is wrong. And now we're up to about 60% of the human race is stuck there. I cannot tell you how many couples come into my office and start having arguments about who's right and who's wrong. They're still doing it. And they are convinced that there's a right way to do things. It's usually the way they thought of, or the way they have learned in their own families of origin to do things, or the way their minister has taught them is the right way to do things. But they're sure they know the right thing, and they're cursed with a partner who's stupid, evil, trying to punish them in some way, wrong-headed, or just crazy, just absolutely crazy. Anybody who has any sense would not want that. That's a crazy person I'm with. And they fight endlessly. They fight to the point of exhaustion, and they revisit the same issues over and over again. And because they've gotten exhausted the first times around, they just stop the fight. But they'll start it again when they stumble into the same thing, and they fight some more. And it goes on and on and on. And one of two things happens: either somebody is finally persuaded that the other person is right, and they try and change their behavior and their belief system. They try to accommodate to the person who's right, or they just surrender and shut up. They may seem to be accommodating, doing what's asked of them, but in their heart of hearts, they know that this is horrible and they're just giving up. And they shouldn't be giving up, but they're exhausted and don't want to keep fighting anymore. And they give up with bitterness, and bitterness starts accumulating, and more episodes of giving up out of bitterness takes place because one of them is more aggressive and more articulate than the other, and the bitterness starts just poisoning the marital relationship until they're drowning in bitterness and have nothing further to say to each other very much, and that's not a good solution either. Only about a quarter of us arrive at better enlightenment, and we come to appreciate that there is no correct way to live. People are simply different. And if nobody's murdering anybody or doing any kind of mayhem, we're entitled to want things the way we want them, or to be most comfortable with them when we're getting what we want. And we wish our partner would see the beauty of what we're wanting or the correctness of what we want, but we understand our partner may not. Our partner is just built differently. Our partner has a contrasting and contradictory need. Our partner doesn't want to give us what we want. Our partner is not evil for not wanting to give us what we want. We have to use the heat of the arousal we're in because we're arguing about this. And instead of trying to find out who's correct, we're living on opposite sides of a chasm now, and there's no bridge across it. There's no way of joining with each other. So we have to become now creative. What is the way to build that bridge? What could we do that's practical and possible that will give both of us some of what we want? It's not going to give either of us the fullness of what we're longing for, but we'll do the best we can. We'll each get something out of this, or we'll take turns if it's something we can take turns about. We'll decide this time, okay, we'll do that your way, but next time I get to pick and choose, and you'll be gracious and you'll decide to do it my way. Even if you're bored, don't like doing it, you'll go along with me and try to be as good a sport as you possibly can because I get to pick this time. That's the ritual we've arrived at, to try and let us be different, but arrive at something workable for the two of us. But let us solve together and find what the way out of this, so we're not living on the angry, hurting other sides of a chasm of impasse. So that's the second thing that has to be resolved early in a relationship. The third thing is recognizing that we have not only recreational differences, how we do things but we are endowed with what I consider basic human yearnings. These are part of human nature, and my human nature is different than the human nature I'm married to. Uh, I like thinking about the essential drivers of our human nature into three categories. One category is we need to be able to do some things that allow us to feel meaningfully connected, and effective in the world. We have to relate to the world in ways that feel meaningful to us and good. We have to like our career or have a hobby that we like, or we like having being able to go off and have uh, some person that we spend time with who is engaged in some project with us. We have to be doing something that makes us feel useful and worthwhile and be effective at whatever is useful and worthwhile. Second of all, we need human warmth. So that we've already talked about. We need to have human attachment. That it it has another function I haven't talked about enough. We all of us generate toxic self-loathing. The human being is the only organism I know that's capable of loathing himself or herself. I don't think spiders loathe themselves. I don't think dogs loathe themselves. Only human beings loathe themselves. Why? Because we have what Freud calls the ego ideal. We've been trained that there's some ideal self that we're supposed to be, and we're never that ideal self. We're always falling short of what we think we might be in the best case scenario. So we're chewing on ourselves. We didn't make it. We didn't turn out as well. We're falling short. And many of us are cursed with severe perfectionism, and we really loathe ourselves. Having human warmth can be the only antidote I know. Well, no, the first one is too. Doing something meaningful in the world. If we can say, I can't be entirely terrible. After all, I made that happen. And that's a very worthwhile thing. Some human beings' lives are now better because I made that happen. That helps us with the self loathing. Seeing a look of admiration and appreciation in the eyes of somebody who's part of our network of warmth, and we respect and admire that person. That person is not a fool. Look, they're looking at us as if there's something worthwhile about us. I can't be entirely terrible if somebody I respect and admire looks at me with some kind of mutual respect and admiration. I've either fooled them entirely, and I don't think that's the case. Maybe there's more to me, and maybe I'm a better person than I give myself credit for being. So that's the second thing we need. We need looks of gratification in the eyes of others. And the third thing we need, as part of our natural endowment and natural ability to survive, is we need solitude. We need to be taken offline. And just as we need to sleep, we need some time to replenish ourselves, daydreaming, having images of alternative lives, problem solving by ourselves, uh, anticipating future, building for some future, just listening to music, just reading poetry, just looking at pictures, anything, going to a movie, anything that gives us a meditative like experience. We need a certain amount of time every week doing self care. And the curse of being human is if we pick somebody to be our partner, the relative amount of time he or she needs doing those three things is different than the relative amount of time we need doing those three things. So we start cursing at our partner. My partner's a workaholic. That's all my partner ever does is want to work. I get so little time where I can be alone with my partner, that we're doing anything that's meaningful to the two of us as a couple. And if the cell phone rings and it's somebody at work needing her time and attention, well, she just dumps me and goes off and does that. Or my partner can't stand too many hours with me. She says she wants to be alone. If I suggest we take a walk after we've had a long conversation. She's spent. She doesn't want any more time with me at that point. So we're mismatched with that regard. Warmth, purpose, and solitude, they're mixed. Uh, and it's hard to get solitude if you're sharing a space with somebody else. I remember it was very hard and scary for me the first time to say to my wife, just act like I'm not here for the next 2 hours. I'm going in another room and I'm going to be by myself. I want to think through something I'm struggling with. I'll talk to you about it when I've had some time alone. I just want to look out the window and listen to some music. I'm spent for today. Now, I thought she was going to yell at me. I had no right to do that. And finding out how to be alone in a small space when you're starting out as a couple and don't occupy much large space together, that's a challenge too. So those rhythms have to be conformed. The rhythms of separateness, the rhythms of warmth, and the rhythms of some kind of connection with the world of work and of making things happen in the world. That's number three. Uh, Number four is implementing sexual intimacy. Simple to describe what intimacy, social intimacy is. It's I've talked about it already. Our stream of consciousness needs to be transparent to the other. We can't keep secrets forever. We should tell secrets. We should share secrets. We should get absolution for secrets if they're ugly. We need the warmth and acceptance of the person we're with to feel really loved. So being socially present and transparent is easy to describe. Being sexually present and engaged with a partner, that's much more complicated because each of us has our own sexual strangenesses and likes and dislikes and tastes and aversions. And that is a whole topic of conversation and experimentation that has to go on over a period of time before we become sensually attuned to each other. And that's a lot of work too. It doesn't just flow magically. We start off interacting with our sexual partner, doing the things that we like and that we've come to believe a large number of other people like. And we may be bumping into something that the other person irritates the other person. We have no way of knowing that. And they have to have the courage to speak up. And we have to confront the fact that we're not a perfect lover for our partner. We may have to learn where to touch and how to touch and when to touch and learn such things are does our partner like having erotic imagery described in her ear or his ear while we're doing it? Or do they want us to shut up and be silent while we're carrying out that activity? What is it that helps turn us on? Uh, are there certain garments we should be wearing? Is there nakedness we should have? Should we shave the hair on our chest? What the hell are we supposed to do in order to be a welcome and worthwhile partner, sexual partner to uh, our beloved? And that takes a lot of work. It doesn't just flow. It takes a willingness to say some things that we're ashamed of, or some things that we think are going to be disgusting to our partner. Uh, hmm. And then there's a final thing in building the intimate system. Oh no, wait, there's two more. There's three more. Oh God, what I'm forgetting. The couple, if it's two, has to develop decision-making rituals. There are that's to avoid fighting endlessly with each other. There are five kinds of decisions. I'll put my five fingers up. I assume you can see them. Over here on this side, there are decisions that have to be made. I'll use my own life as an example that my partner has no interest in. She doesn't even want to be bothered with having to hear about this decision that needs to be made. A good example of that is for my wife, automobiles. She made it clear to me as we started to form our partnership that she hated dealing with cars. She only wanted one thing. She is a worker and she needs transportation. She wants to be able to go out in the morning, put a key in the ignition, start the car, and feel reasonably comfortable that the car is going to arrive safely at the destination and not break down and strand her somewhere, and she wants to get home again. She doesn't have to worry about what to do when the car needs service, what to do when the car is acting strangely or needs some kind of repair, what to do when the car is getting older and it's time to think about is it time to replace it or repair it significantly, what should be done about all that. She said, I'm not a fancy person. I don't need a new car. I don't need a lavish car. I just need a safe and comfortable car. Would you provide that for me? I certainly don't want to deal with people who interact with the car other than you. I don't like taking a car in to be serviced. I think most places the men are sexist. They treat me with contempt. They treat me as if I'm stupid. It's an unpleasant experience. I don't like negotiating car deals. That's an awful experience as far as I'm concerned. Will you take over and do that for me? And I said, yes, I repair cars myself. I don't mind dealing with automobiles. I have fun dealing with that. You're very fortunate. I'll never bring up cars. You don't have to talk to me about cars in any way or help out in any way. Uh, on the other side, things that I don't want to be bothered with, I'm going through an example right now. The sofa in our living room is getting shabby, and it's beginning to sag a little, and it probably needs to be replaced. I trust my wife's taste. She's made us nice surroundings. I've deferred her about many things. She started asking me, "What do you want to do around about the sofa? I think it needs to be replaced." I said, "There's only one thing I want to do about the sofa. Do you have a ballpark estimate of what you think it might cost to replace the sofa?" You've delegated to me the prime responsibility for watching over the finances, even though you get involved. So that's all. The only thing I know, replacing the sofa comes with some kind of price tag involved with it. So, yes, give me a figure as you start working your way through this. I don't want to think about, are we going to get it reupholstered or buy a new one? Are we going to put slip covers on it? What color should it be? What kind of fabric should it be? Uh, who is where should we acquire this if it's going to be reupholstered? What's the research that needs to be done to find a good reupholstery shop? If we need a slip cover, who makes slip covers? What store should we go to look at examples of things to buy? Leave me out of this. I don't want to have to be here when the sofa gets taken out of here if it's going to be worked on. You have to be here. I don't want to change my schedule for the damn sofa. You'll have to figure out when it's going to be picked up if it's going out and coming back. And I don't want to look at books of fabric. That bores me. I trust your taste. Just magically have a new sofa of some kind there one day, and I'm sure I'll like it and be comfortable. So that's all the way out on the other side. That's an area decorating the house and making it look lovely and having what colors to put on the walls. All of that. I trust her to do something aesthetically pleasing. If she asks for my opinion, I'll tell her, but she doesn't even have to ask for my opinion as far as I'm concerned. She has a dilemma she's having about it. I'll respond. I'll answer, but I don't need to be asked. If you move in from that central principle, she's totally in charge. I'm totally in charge. Towards a more center position, these are things that have to get decided in a household. But somebody, if we can't agree, somebody has to be chosen to make the final choice. Otherwise, we'll go on arguing forever. And the other person has to accept the role of consultant. They know they're going to be asked. The other person can go ahead and finally decide, but they're going to be asked, and some period of time could be given over to debating it. I'll give an example from my side. I have a wonderful Ansel Adams photo print. It's a picture of Yosemite at dusk, and I love it. When we moved into our current digs from the previous digs where we were in, I looked at where pictures were going, and I said, I know you're in charge of decorating, but there's a space right next to the fireplace, and I'd like to put my Ansel Adams picture there. I don't want it where I can't see it. I will love having it there because it's a room I'm in frequently, and it always puts me in a good mood to look at it. And it's where I read the newspaper in the morning, have coffee. I was just opposite there. I'll like looking up and seeing my Ansel Adams photograph when I take a little break and have a sip of coffee. She said, no, it doesn't go there at all. It's going to be jarringly out of place there. That's not the right place for it. It's never going to go there. And I said, well, this once. Wouldn't no. Have an integrated look. I have a place for each piece of artwork. I think I know where it goes. I'm coloring the walls to backstop where the art what the artwork is going to be look at. This is an integrated space, and I want it to just be a wonderful place for everybody to go and visit. It's not your special place. This is a public space where we're going to entertain people and welcome them to. So I'm sorry you can't have that one. Why don't you put it in your study? You have a built-in desk there. Just put it right over your desk, and you can see it frequently when you're taking little breaks from your paperwork. It'll be there, and it'll be in a special place for you. So I agreed to do that, and I gave up arguing with her about that. Uh, I mentioned that money is another source of things that we had to work out, and she wants to be consulted. She said, I don't think I'm as smart about money as you are. I will defer to your decisions. You've kept us safe and steady for many years already. We're moving into the next stage of our life. We're beginning to accumulate retirement funds. I trust you to find a money advisor or to manage investments yourself, and you can have the last word. But if I get an idea, I want to be free to talk to you about it. I said, of course. And she came in, most recently was about 2 months ago. She was reading about the pandemic and some ways the market might move as the pandemic starts lifting. And she said, I think we should buy some airline stock now. And with a little bit of money, let's play with $10,000 and get $10,000 worth of airline stock. Well, why do you think we should buy airline stock? Airlines are being hammered all over the place. She said, people are going to want to travel. There's going to be great exuberance about traveling as soon as the pandemic lifts, and airline stocks are very depressed right now. Let's get some now. And I thought she was making a good suggestion. And I said, all right, let's do that. You've convinced me. And she said, if you said no, that would be okay. I trust you to take good care of our money. So we've worked that out. That's 4 of the 5 piles. There is only a small number of things where I think both people should have veto power. Nobody does or decides that unless they get a buy-in from the other, and they're not arguing anymore. They're agreeing. I brought up the space we occupy. I think that's an example. Nobody should be forced to live in a neighborhood or in a house that they detest simply because the other person thinks it's practical. You got to keep looking for that space. You got to keep looking for houses. And no house will give either one of you everything you want, but it'll be something that gives both of you most of what you want. And that's probably the house you could buy and acknowledge the limitations, but feel reasonably comfortable that you can both live there without detesting it, at least feeling that it's a reasonable place for you. The other area I think of is sometimes the kids present you with a dilemma. What should you do about some distress they're in or some special permission they want to do something? I think parents should try to remain on the same page as much as possible. And if you start off arguing and having serious differences of opinion about what to do with a child, tell the child just going to have to wait. This one is really complicated, and the two parents have to arrive at some kind of resolution before answering the request or changing whatever the structure is. And so those are the two good examples. I'm sure in other relationships there are other examples of some area of living that's so important to both of them. Oh, moving to another city. That's a good one. Yes, that's not only moving to a dwelling, but somebody has a career possibility change, but they have to move to another city. That one's very significant. Somebody wanting to stop earning money and going back to school, which is going to change the family finances markedly. That would be a good one to not move forward unless there's a buy-in from both people and some problem solving done by both. But it's a relatively small number of things that are in that middle pile. You can save a lot of time and trouble if you can work out what are the unique ones that can be decided by one person, what are the shared ones where one person is the consultant, but the other person has the last decision making capacity. Otherwise, I see young couples who will go to the market and they'll have serious arguments about which brand of toilet paper to buy and uh, what kind of squash they should have for dinner that night. And they'll really fight with each other as if those things were of great importance. And they have a romantic notion they should agree comfortably on everything. And that would be absolutely exhausting and inefficient to have to agree comfortably about everything. All right, so that's problem solving rituals. I said there were two more. What the hell was the second one? All right, I'll take up the last one I can remember. Uh, Creating a joint budget. This one is a bitch. I think many people will enter the institution of marriage, but they're only married legally. One or both of them is having a lot of side flirtation, side affairs, carrying a lot of secrets, not really sharing fully what's going on. So they're married in name only. And the second way they avoid being married to each other is they keep money separate. He has his money, and the other he, if it's gay couple, he has his money, and they do some kind of bookkeeping and sharing. They'll put some money in a common pot for some common activities like the mortgage payment or the rent or recreation or uh, a monthly marketing budget, how much they're going to spend in the markets. But they keep significant amounts of money apart. And I always argue with them. The money you have affects how you live your life and what decisions are possible for the two of you to make as a couple. I far prefer that all the money be put into a common pot. A's income stream and B's income stream, A's savings and B's savings. They be put in a common pot, and then the couple sit down for days on end, if necessary, arguing with each other, creating a budget. There are fixed expenses, so the beginnings of budget making is easy. What's housing costs? What's insurance costs? What's health insurance costs? What are automobile expenses? If there are children, what are we spending on school tuition, life insurance? There's a fixed expenses. What's discretionary may be only as much as 30% of a budget, but that's when the arguments start. If it's a woman, for instance, the man says, how much money do you spend on clothing a year? What do you mean? You're going to get involved in how much money I spend on clothing each year? Well, I may not have to. It depends on how the rest of our budget goes. But yes, how much money do you spend on clothing each year? I'll tell you how much I spend on mine. Uh, that is a discretionary item in some ways. That could be expanded or jiggered down. How much money are we going to put away? Are we going to save anything and put it into some kind of retirement fund? That should be part of the budget. We should hew to it if we're going to do that. How much money are we going to spend on vacations each year? We even need to think about that. That's a discretionary item. We can go away for a weekend to Long Beach, or we can go to Tahiti for 2 weeks. I mean, those are very, very different sums of money. What's really important to us? So you lock yourself up in a room and you keep negotiating with each other, and you come up with a unified budget. And as part of their budget, there should be a small discretionary fund. In my household, there's $200 a month. I have a $200 a month allowance that I don't have to account for or ask for permission to spend, and my wife does. We each have a little bit of total freedom, and we don't have to check in with the other person. Any other budget revision or alteration requires more negotiation, but not that one. I typically add it, I save up the $2,400 a year. I add it to what we're going to spend on vacations. I like a little bit better vacation than my wife does. So I use my discretionary money to give us a more comfortable vacation. She tends to give endless gifts to grandchildren with her allowance. That's what she does. She figures creative ways to give more gifts to the grandchildren. God bless her. So that's my comment about budgeting. And I have actually forgotten what one of the other nodes of something that has to be resolved by the couple is. Well, I'm out of time. Maybe it'll come to me in the coming week. And I will first check out of screen sharing. I'll have to come back to this next week because I've talked about all these things I've been talking about are how the intimate system gets formed, and it's unique and particular thing for the unique couple. B, realignment of relationships with extended families and friends to include significant other or others is a whole other topic because the whole family has to move and make space to accommodate this one. Otherwise, it won't come together properly. And I will make a note to go there at the beginning of our next session together. And I will now tune out, go out of screen sharing. So now I'm back in regular format and I turn the floor over. I've prattled on a lot, a mile a minute.
Arthur, what about the person who is not able to develop a significant attachment in their adult lives?
They need a lot of help. They have
Well,
failed. We'll be talking about them. They failed miserably. They've been ill served at much earlier developmental stages. So they need a lot of repair work starting earlier in life before they will move by steps through the various stages and arrive at that destination if they live long enough and if you're effective enough. So that's what about them. My model accounts for them and what to do. Give up trying to get them to solve that. They ain't ready. They're not old enough emotionally.
what can they expect in their lives?
To do a lot of work and to overcome, to start overcoming where the damage started.
What if they don't want to do any work?
Oh, I was just called about somebody like that today. He wants to just barge in and tell his parents he's miserable. He lives 2, 3 blocks away. He's miserable, and he's going to kill himself, and his life is worthless. And he wants to overdose on uppers and downers and get drunk and get fired over and over again. He wants them to support him, and he doesn't have a single friend and certainly no significant other. And they came to me asking what they should do with him.
It's a tough client.
Yep. Hmm. They have to start repairing him. He has to go back and be a helpless infant that everything is done for. He needs to be in a controlled environment. I would like to set up an attuned rehab that's very different from the ones we have right now. But that's a whole other immortality project for myself. Truly an asylum where people like this could go and get reparented.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
I'd like to.
Doing it once or twice a week on an outpatient basis is probably doomed. Unless they really have hit bottom and they feel courageous, so courageously and despairingly driven, they aren't going to kill themselves, that they decide that they will try and trust somebody because they have to come and trust the therapist. They don't have an intimate relationship with anybody. So they will take a chance on somebody. Oh, this young man that I'm hearing about in his early 30s, he's been to 5 different therapists and he fires them after 1 or 2 visits. He finds something wrong with them and flees. He won't bond with them either. So you gave me a good question. It was a mystical day, and I have an exact example of what you're talking about that was laid on my doorstep today. Other comments or questions?
I'd like to throw back to that this thing you said earlier in the questioning unquestioned role behavior, and
Yeah,
how that is a, I don't know, a through theme. I think it comes up in almost, at least for me, and maybe it's my own preference, that something that I almost do in every session.
yeah,
Um, I would even add not recently questioned role behavior, because I know there are times, oftentimes in people when they hit near their 40s, that they start to wonder how much of their life was lived up to that point, fulfilling other people's expectations. And there's kind of a reassessment that can occur.
yes,
But there's also kind of, even after that, oftentimes it's perhaps just our nature to start becoming, like Helmuth Kaiser would say, the duplicity, living in these
yeah,
ways that just aren't authentic.
yes.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Thank you. Uh,
yeah.
it's often manifested in the following way. There's some dilemma going on in their life, and they say, of course, I have to do X about this dilemma. And I love saying, oh, you don't have to do X. Why are you saying, of course, you have to do X? There may be three other alternatives. I guess you haven't even considered. And if they ask me what they are, I'll tell them what the other alternative. Well, I couldn't do any of those things. Well, why couldn't you? That's where the dialogue goes.
Hmm. Yeah. And then when you were talking about that limerence stage, um, I like to look at the idea that there's a magical other. That if you just find the magical other, then you'll be happy. And I hate to be, what was it, as Yalom would say, love's executioner at some level.
Yeah,
I'm the magical other executioner.
absolutely. I am too. Oh my God. I think we spend a lot of time in the work we do busting the myths that exist in the culture,
Yeah.
calling them into question, saying that they are myths.
You talk about the need for solitude, and I think I know a lot of individuals who try to avoid solitude all of their lives.
Yeah,
Do,
because God forbid they might start hearing their own authentic voice if they didn't keep distracting themselves.
do you need to have introspection in order to seek out solitude?
If you seek out solitude, and I mean really solitude where you have taken yourself offline, you don't have to seek out introspection. Imagery starts rising and your thoughts start coming. Alternative lives start occurring to you. You become receptive to yourself. Oh, the boundary between what Jung calls, I forgot what he calls the external self, and the shadow parts of us begins to soften, and we start glimpsing our own shadow inside. That's why I want people to have enough solitude. Oh God, people, I've had some people as acquaintances who can't stand being alone. And that seems like a tragedy to me. They just have to keep distracting themselves. God forbid they might start paying attention to other truths if they didn't keep distracting themselves.
It's oftentimes painful, I've noticed with
Yeah.
clients, when I try to get them to just sit with themselves, that
Oh yeah.
they cry, it can be very disturbing if you haven't really tried before. In a culture and a society that's ultimately increasingly becoming designed to inherently design a lifestyle of Freudian manic defense, to run from everything.
Oh my God. What do we run into? We run into social media and we try and get lost in the postings of other people.
Yeah.
I got to see what my 100 favorite people on FaceTime are doing right now. Facebook.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you again for being with me today, and I shall return next week.
Thank
All
you.
right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye
Ta
now.
ta.